Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sat means truth, logos means a study or science. Sattology means a science of truth or study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means a science of fake lie imagination. Today's show is with your very favorite, uh, very popular analyst. And today we're going to talk about multiple issues all over the world, particularly the India's leadership in climate, which is shown in COP26, and also the global G20 summit, and also the conflict which India faces, particularly from China, Pakistan, and lot more issues, WTO, WHO, because as India is growing and the world can see that it is growing, it is declared to be one of the fastest growing economies, but we do not know the actual results, but still it has the projections have been pretty consistent over the years, IMF projections. So on all these issues, let us welcome Sri Abhijit Iyer Mitra.
Thanks for having me on. I apologize in advance. You're going to be seeing my backdrop moving a lot because you see my kitten here, they play these games with my doggies here where, they're like, yeah. So this is what they keep getting up to. You can see, hey, stop biting wires. Shoo! So, yeah. So it's like ever since I got these kittens last month, it's been non-stop mayhem at home. They get along very well with the dogs, but it's just too boisterous. So I'm really, really sorry if you get interrupted in between.
So, so we already had the agenda, like with when we talk about India attending and getting a very global, this is the first time the Indian diplomacy is recognized by the West to a large extent, and which you can see in our times. Before that, I have not seen it, but you also see American leadership, also Biden and other places, they're opening up their purses for climate crisis, climate change, and other things. So what do you see India's position in COP26 and also G20? According to you, how strong is India? Or what is India's actual position there?
So look, in many ways, being in sync with the environment is something we've always, it's been at the core of who we are. Which is why when you come to India, almost every second animal is sacred. People think it's only the cow. No. Almost literally every single animal is sacred, except say the goat and the chicken, because, exceptions had to be made for protein consumption. So pigeons are sacred to somebody, rats are sacred to somebody else, monkeys are sacred to somebody else, snakes and cats you never ever kill because they are too sacred. When you buy a new house, the prayers are said when you move into your new house, you always beg forgiveness for any cats that have been displaced and snakes that have been removed from their house. And it was always, meant to be in balance with nature in that sense. I guess that is why when that movie Avatar came out, I remember the then Pope Benedict, I think he was, Cardinal Ratzinger, he issued this thing that was Buddhist or Hindu-Buddhist autoeroticism at play kind of thing. So, but that is kind of how we're meant to be. It's not ideal, of course, but it's how we're meant to be. Now, that's why he quoted a lot of mantras when he spoke, showing that we're essentially going back to our roots of living in harmony with nature. But it's also a very important strategic move because, look, if you localize the technologies for solar, so first there's collection technologies and then there's storage and dispersal technologies. So, there's like iron air batteries, there's things like Repco, the truly fascinating stuff. So in a sense, he's also making a bid for technology. He's making a bid for economic growth, significant economic growth where you can have significant first movers advantage if you adopt nascent technologies. The other thing that you can do very realistically out here is also uh, uh, become a sort of leader where you're taking such a huge commitment. Because the 2070 commitment is to net zero. And that's very significant. But it's also a challenge to the West. Because remember, all the technology we need is tied up in private patents in the West. So the West has to overcome a lot of the patent laws and things like that for those technologies to get to India for us to be used up. So it's also a very smart move of bypassing certain laws and saying, put your money where your mouth is. So all up very good, I think. It's a classic win-win solution, according to me.
When you look at the WHO's politics against Indian vaccine, and I personally believe that they recently India took a step against UK on the 10-day, which is reciprocal quarantine. And in Covaxin case, we have seen that Covaxin in India has been far more effective than AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca is known as Covishield in India. It is banned in the US. The US doesn't use AstraZeneca. So do you think the WHO is playing games? And the chief who met with the Prime Minister Modi, do you think that Prime Minister Modi would have confronted him on that?
So look, there's two things here. One is everybody knows. I think the main issue that has been brought forth by this entire COVID mismanagement is how incestuous, inbred, and corrupt the entire global health situation is. The Eco Health Alliance chairman being the goalpost keeper for Lancet magazine, using Lancet as a bully pulpit to bully anybody who spoke against China, while he was funding all kinds of research out there, and then going and also being a fact checker for Facebook and removing any posts there that were critical of China. All this time while he was actually funding gain of function research in Wuhan. The same man is completely cozy with Fauci and Bill Gates, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation only push drugs that they've invested in and things like that for early whatever. So, I think it's a good thing because we've wisened up to how the world works, where arm twisting has to work. The problem is, I don't think Bharat Biotech that manufactures the Covaxin was our best ambassador for the world because, it's a company run by a scientist. And they got a lot of their prognostications and calculations. I'm sorry, my cat is she's insufferable at the moment. And it's just one of those things where taking the bull by the horns is fine. But remember, Bharat Biotech suffers from bad management. They know medicine, but they don't know marketing and business. And on the other hand, you have a thoroughly corrupt system. We have to be very careful here where we're giving Bharat Biotech a way in to the circle of corruption without actually breaking the corruption. And that's the main thing that has to be done.
If you look at the climate crisis, and India's demand is absolutely right, because in the climate crisis, if you look at it, the Western world has been majorly responsible for pollution due to chemicals and emissions. And the whole world actually is using the Western model of automobiles and the engines. And in India and other developing countries, they have consistently opposed it. And India has been very consistent that the share of climate protection has to be borne by the West majorly, because they are the ones who are majorly responsible for it. So do you think that India's position might change by 2070? Because 2070 is what Prime Minister Modi has committed to a net zero emission.
Look, it'll depend a lot on the technology that we're given. So I think our position won't change as long as we can turn it into an economic powerhouse and use those technologies that we get or lease from the West. I think that's the most important thing that we're looking forward to at the moment. But remember, even the West has a long way to go. You look at American cities, they're fundamentally inefficient places. In terms of urban planning, I think any serious urban planner will tell you that American cities and suburbia, which is every American's dream come true, is the absolute most inefficient and worst way of planning a city, which actually leads to massive energy inefficiency. It leads to transport inefficiency, which in turn compounds the energy inefficiency. This car dependence, this lack of public transport. So America has a different set of problems from America and Canada have a different set of problems than, say, Europe. And Europe, for its part, has a kind of a reverse problem. It has very organic cities which are actually brilliantly planned for when they were planned, but they've been investing in a lot of technology dead ends, which may not be good for us. And that is the way India doesn't achieve its target in 2070 is if we combine the European Union's flights of fantasy with American urban planning. Because you can get one thing wrong, you can't get both things wrong. So you have to get your urban planning right and you have to get your industrial plan right.
See, on the record, the per capita American debt to every single American, whether it's a born or adult, just born child, is $175,000 today per head. That's the collective debt on each.
And it's going to keep going up.
Keep going up.
And a lot of it has to do with cars and fuel as well, in addition to education, a useless education that you're going to Harvard and paying $40,000 a semester for what? A literature course when you can't, at the end of that literature course, you can't write to save your life. Or a gender studies course where at the end of it, you're none the wiser for gender or biology or anything like that. But cities are also a huge contributor. Imagine if you're a low income worker in America. You need to have a house. You can't afford the house in the city, so you have to be far away. You need to have a car. You need to buy a new car. You need to pay the fuel for it. And even though it's cheap, it's not really all that cheap considering how much fuel you're going to use up. It's things that could have been done much easier. So look, each society has its own set of problems. All of that has to be sorted out. My only hope is for India, we can learn from America's urban planning mistakes and Europe's technology dead-end mistakes.
See, one of the things in America is a gas tax has been introduced now in the state of California and anywhere else, where the one more successive charge for the first time in the history, I think maybe a third time in the history, the gas is retailing in some places in California is almost $7 to a gallon. It used to be $3 during Trump administration. And it's just spiraling out. And the US has cut the gas production.
I find it amazing that California, of all places, is doing this. Because remember, California is the one that wants to be a migrant-friendly place. Now, if you're looking at illegal immigrants coming in, they are, let's face it, illegal immigrants do provide valuable labor in several parts of America. You're making it impossible for them to commute and find jobs. You're actually sucking up in your... It's completely counterproductive. If you're somebody in San Francisco, where are you going to live? Your commute takes such a long time. You need to have a car. You're going to end up paying $7 per gallon and things like that. It's not going to work. I don't know who's making these policies, but they're all at cross purposes with each other. I honestly don't get it. I think in terms of policy contradiction, California has the most serious case of cranial rectal inversion.
So in one of the things is, since it's California we're talking, in California, what they have done is is that the food prices, inflation has shot up by 36%, 36%. And you can look at the American population. There are no street protests, nothing. I think it will all show up in the 2022 mid elections. The
But there is high crime. There is rising crime.
rising crime, the police has been defunded to a large extent. People do not arrest, nobody is arrested for not being a citizen right now. So there
I
are,
wonder, saw the list of the 20 most violent cities in America that New York Times brought out. 18 of those 20 are under Democrat mayors, and 18 of those 20 have been enacting all this progressive legislation, which has taken them from bad to worse.
now coming back to the California being the richest economy, and they've created the largest number of unicorns in the entire USA. Almost like 35% of all unicorns of America are located in California.
Mhm.
And when these companies grow up, they become big, they move out of the state. Generally, it has been the trend. It's the incubator and they move out. But the problem with the US faces not only strategic, like the global, there is a policy paralysis, and there is a new global body coming up called CANZUK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and UK, to fill in the vacuum created by the US military superpower status. So, do you think that the AUKUS or Quad has any standing when this new grouping comes up?
This new grouping won't be anything. I mean, when was the last time Britain, Canada, Australia, or especially the Kiwis fought squat? I mean, seriously, what exactly are the Kiwis going to do in any this thing? They don't even have fighter aircraft. Like if the Chinese land on their shores, what are they going to do? That haka dance that the Maoris do to at the beginning of rugby games. Tekanahi. Are you kidding me? They're not even a military. If you stand up the Canadian military, they won't last for 30 minutes against the Chinese.
The defense minister is Indian now, and
Uh,
and
and true to being a third world Indian, he's a monumental klutz.
even the army chief is an Indian, is a Sikh person, Indian origin.
God save Canada.
See, the next part is the China. So when we look at the Chinese military deployments, they're consistently increasing. Like you see, YouTube is filled with creating like a new Chinese. This Chinese gun has come. This has come. This has come. And India is doing mirror deployment. In fact, it's more than a mirror deployment. It's not being reported in India, but the foreign media knows that India has 2:1 advantage at the border right now, so far. So what do you have to say on that?
Nothing. It's the same that I've always had to say on this, which is that in the short term, say 15 to 20 days, India can hold its own. The real problem sets in if any conflict continues past 30 days.
Do you think that China's economy can sustain it? Most of the cities are dead, and most of the revenues are highly inflated for the world. In fact, there are two of the largest property firms have collapsed, and which has already cut a hole of $700 billion in Chinese revenue, CPC revenues. So, do you think China can hold economically? I don't think so.
You know, a 3 trillion, now I think it's almost 4 trillion now, a $4 trillion reserve is fantastic for papering over all kinds of economic blunders. So China's day of reckoning keeps getting postponed by the sheer size of your reserves. And that's perfectly fine, but I think the day of reckoning is still about at least 10, maybe 15, maybe even up to 30 years away. What form that will take, I don't know, because it will depend on so many other factors at that given point of time, but it will get there.
America's reluctance to participate in wars, and what happens to their actual commitment to Taiwan, Japan, Germany, and many other countries?
This is my worry, that America is willing to commit to endless, pointless regime change operations, but it's not willing to commit to protect its allies. Right? What was the need to go into Libya? and you've created a completely unstable society out there. Afghanistan, I understand you want to punish someone, but why do you need to nation build the whole damn place up? Syria, you've destroyed it as a functioning society. Kosovo is a nightmare now for anyone out there because it's full of all kinds of criminals. What exactly was it that people expected from all of this? You know, this is a very dangerous what to say, overextension of empire, where you're fighting all the wars you should be fighting, and you seem to be weak on all the wars that are worth fighting, like defending Taiwan, like defending Japan, etc., etc.
So in one of the scenarios, like where the India and the US are forging close military alliance, and I'm pretty much sure that the India will get a waiver from the US Congress and Senate on the AS 400 sale, which is pretty much sure done deal. Even if it does not happen, it doesn't affect India because American share of trade for even today, China is one of the biggest American Indian uh, export market or import market, you can say. Importers, China, India is the biggest importer. So do you think that in the eventual case of China India face off, America can or has the military strength to support India if India needs it? Probably India won't need it at all.
Look, it's not just a question of strength to support us, it's also a willingness to take on someone, right? The problem is, if they support us, we still won't have those weapons can't be rapidly integrated. You know, before in 1962, when our war with China happened and America sent us help, it was all mechanical stuff. You just, screwed bombs onto the same plane and those same planes dropped it and things like that. It was all radio communication. It was a matter of codes and you just spoke to each other. Today, it's such sophisticated systems and things like that. You can't just sell India stuff and expect us to use it. Not happening, right? Second, is America willing to create a diversion? But creating a diversion means attacking on the other side, right? So it's literally that America was willing to declare war on Germany. Germany was willing to open a second front on Russia. But is America willing to open that second front? I think not. Especially not for a treaty ally, for a non-treaty ally.
See, one of the Indian vice admirals, I do not remember the name, but I was watching him. He said, with China, the better place to fight is the Indian Navy operations in the ocean, because that's where the room for maneuver is higher, and as compared to the land, there is very little you can maneuver, but in the oceans is a better place to fight. And Indian Navy's strength, if you look at the manpower, is less, around 60,000 men.
The manpower doesn't matter as much as the tonnage and the sophistication of your ships.
Mhm.
The problem is just one Chinese destroyer. Is it the Type 52 or the Type 55? I don't know, the latest iteration of it, which is basically meant to be the Chinese version of the Aegis class, the Aleberg Aegis class destroyers. They have more vertical launch tubes for missiles than the entire Indian Eastern Fleet has put together. One ship, more vertical launch tubes than the entire Indian Eastern Fleet. Now that should tell you a lot.
No, if you look at the vertical tubes, that normally an Indian carrier has around 6 to 8 vertical tubes, and India has 10 destroyers, so which you look at around 70.
No. See, those carriers, you never measured carriers in terms of VLSs because those VLSs are purely for self-defense. The carrier's main weapon is its planes. Okay, you only measure destroyers. In the destroyers that we have, it's something like between what, 16 to 24 to, I think the latest one has about maybe 32, but I'm not even sure. I think even that is just 24. So, it's sad, but it is what it is. One of their destroyers, the latest one, has something like 120 more. Last we counted, it was about 150 tubes or something like that.
It's like the tube ship. Is the tube ship?
Yeah.
They're sitting on the tubes?
Yeah. It is.
Is it a remotely piloted vehicle? Because I doubt anything Chinese. Anything Chinese. I have so much experience. I would just tell you.
Look, I in Chinese as well. The issue is it keeps coming back to Stalin's dictum that quantity has a quality all of its own. It may not be high quality, but they can just overwhelm you with quantity, which is what the Russians did to the Germans, which is what the Chinese did to the Japanese. Because remember, the Japanese army, despite all its brutality, the rape of Nanjing and all of that, they ultimately got bogged down in China because the Chinese didn't mind dying in the millions. Well, they minded, not that they had an option, but they did.
And one of the least reported things in the US was a recent US submarine, USS Connecticut, hit something in the South China Sea. Nobody's saying.
An uncharted mountain.
It's a mountain?
But yeah, it was an uncharted mountain, a previously uncharted mountain. Because remember, we think that the sea is somehow a 2D map. It's not. It's a dynamic 3D environment where you can't have mapped every single square inch of ocean for every single depth. So in this case, it went to a previously uncharted thing where no oceanographic vessel would have gone at a depth that nobody else had been before. We just so happened to have a mountain and it got badly injured.
Yeah. And just I was telling you, recently I got a battery pack from one of made in China ones, solar panel, for my trip to India. I never got it on time. It doesn't work. And I'm just saying, this is just the case of one battery pack. And with what to speak of J20s. Now, when you talk about J20s, over high plane, underpowered, is the the power to the weight ratio is 1 to 1.08. I mean, that plane cannot do a vertical takeoff also. It's a
look. So the Chinese window dress a lot of what they do. They look good at times. See, they understand some of the how, but not the why. And all production has two components to it, the how and the why. They copy the how, but unless you understand the why, you can't extract the maximum out of it. So, for example, एक मिनट रुक जाओ बेटा. I'll have to go now. But just to finish off with this example, you can watch videos on how to make bread. But unless you're a master baker, you won't know how to make a fantastic loaf. You can make a basic loaf, you can't make a fantastic loaf. That is the how and the why. The how is the reading of the recipe, the why is the masterclass. I have to go now because there's repairs at home. The guy has come and I'll have to leave.
Yeah. Thank you, Abhijit, for coming on the show and telling us what you feel about all these different strategic affairs. Just one last question before you go. Do you think that India and the USA military partnership, because if you look at the colonial history, UK has always put India down. And today, UK's military assets are flowing right in the Indian Ocean, right south of it. Do you think the India-US closer ties can affect the India-UK not so closer ties when UK and Canada have always housed anti-India?
It won't matter because UK will always prioritize America over India. So any India-UK relationship will fundamentally be dependent on the India-US relationship. The way to get the UK to break its sort of love of Pakistan is to first get America to give up its love of Pakistan. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thanks,
Namaste.
guys. Bye.